and welcome to the Plant School podcast. I'm Rachel Tenney, and here we learn all about plants, how they work, how to care for them, and it's all taught in a way that anyone from beginner to expert can listen to, understand, and enjoy. So I hope that you will join me in Plant School. Hello and welcome to the Plant School podcast. I am a little bit behind on my usual posting schedule. I don't even know if anyone really notices, but I notice and it bugs me. So I apologize for anyone that may have noticed that my schedule is a little bit off. I'm hoping to get back into the swing of things. A lot of you, if you've been listening for a while, may know that I was expecting a baby. And I say was because he's here. He came a little bit earlier than I was expecting, hence why my posting schedule is a tiny bit off, because I was caught by surprise. So today's episode is a rerun. I hope you guys understand. For anyone that has kids, I know you understand. I'm so happy to have him here. He's doing well, I'm doing well, but it has just thrown me for a loop with my podcasting schedule is all. So I appreciate you being so patient with me as I figure this all out. Because of all that craziness, today's episode is a rerun of one of my favorites that I posted around 2 years ago. It's crazy that it's been that long, but it's all about medicinal houseplants and kind of medicinal plants in general. And as I was looking into this episode, re-listening to it, I had forgotten so much of what I covered, and I really enjoyed relearning all of it. So I hope you guys feel the same way, that as you listen, if you have already heard this one, that you can learn something new from this. But before I get into this rerun, I gotta do my giveaway winners. So every single episode, I do a giveaway winner. They win a package from Market Botany. If you want to check out their website, go to marketbotany.com. You can even use a code, Plant School Podcast, and it'll give you 10% off. But they send a giveaway package with a bottle of their prop drops, which really helps your water propagations take off. And then they also send you a bottle of leaf shine. And how I choose a winner is I take someone who has left a review on Apple Podcasts, and then I also take another winner. I take that winner from Spotify, someone who has commented on the most recent episode. If you are listening on Spotify and not sure how to comment, you literally just scroll down on this episode and there's a little section where you can comment. And what I do is I ask a question verbally in every episode to kind of base your comment around. So for today's episode, being all about medicinal plants, what I want to know is, have you ever used like a raw plant and created any sort of medicine for you to use? And I mention this in every episode, that if you comment something random, not related to the episode, that's okay too. I will not exclude those answers from the giveaway. So feel free to comment. You can do it on every single episode if you want to and keep re-entering until you win. That's totally fine with me, but I will be choosing a comment from the most recent episode. So let's dive into today's winners. Let's start with Spotify. Last episode, it was all about planty board games. Quite a few of you had played different board games or had more suggestions for other board games. So if you want more suggestions, honestly, go look at the comments from last episode. But our winner today, they say in their comment that their name is B because their username is a little bit harder to pronounce. But they said, "Hi there, first-time commenter. Don't bother pronouncing my username in your head. I'm B, and I am loving this podcast. I listen at work, and it makes my day. I highly recommend Botany." That was one of the games I talked about in last week's episode. They continue, "It is so much fun when you figure out how it all works. A tip: needs a pretty big play area as the board is quite large and there's a need for each player to have their own space to place things. I wish I'd known it before pulling everything out of the box the first time, haha." That's good to know, because Botany was one of the games that I thought looked really cool and am still very tempted to buy. So B, if you are listening, email me at tenneyplants@gmail.com. That's TENNEY plants@gmail.com, and I will get you set up with your giveaway package from Market Botany. Moving over to Apple Podcasts, someone who has left a review is going to win the next giveaway package. Our winner today is Cool One. They say, I am so glad that I found this podcast. I've been struggling with a lot of my houseplants, and this is the first podcast that I have found that really goes into detail about how to care for each plant and really answered all of my questions. It makes me so happy to hear. I love knowing that this podcast is helpful for my listeners. So if that was you, Cool One, that left that review, email me at tinnyplants@gmail.com and I will send you your giveaway package. And if you would like to win in next episode's giveaway, which they should be coming out every other week, that's my normal posting schedule, feel free to leave a comment if you're listening on Spotify or if you're listening on Apple Podcasts. Leave a quick review, does not take much time, and boom, you are entered into our little giveaway that we do every single episode. All right, without further ado, here's the rerun of Medicinal Plants, and I just again want to say thank you for your understanding during this kind of crazy time of my life, getting used to a new baby. I do really appreciate you being here and listening in. All right, now I'm going to stop talking so you can hear past Rachel start talking, which probably all sounds the same. Welcome to this week's Plant School episode. Today's episode is one that I have had on my list for a while and I just haven't gotten around to it. And once I started researching, I realized how much I loved it. Just love this topic, love learning about it, and I hope you guys feel the same way by the end of this episode. So today we're talking about medicinal houseplants. And at the end of the episode, I'm going to go through houseplants that are medicinal, and some of them you can even use. You can find recipes and use them, which is really, really neat. But before we get there, I want to give a background of medicinal plants and kind of hopefully help you realize what exactly that means and have a fuller appreciation for them. So first things first, what does medicinal mean? Now I want to answer this question because I took a class while I was in college called Medicinal Plants, and when I would tell people oh, I'm headed to medicinal plants, the most common question I got when I told people was, what is that? What's medicinal plants? What does that even mean? Medicinal on its own means a substance or plant having healing properties. But yeah, it was one of my favorite classes in college. I'm actually taking a bit of the knowledge from that class from slideshows. And you're probably how do you still have slideshows from a class you took in college years ago? Well, I literally downloaded them when I was enrolled. I just wanted to save all the knowledge I had. I didn't trust my notes for the class. So thank you, Professor Alphin. I love you. I may be using some of your notes for this podcast episode, and I really appreciate it. Okay, so moving on, what makes a plant medicinal? So plants have hundreds of chemical compounds within them, and they function as defenses against insects and fungi, disease, mammals, basically anything that can attack it or harm it. They have chemicals within them that have developed over, centuries of evolution that keep these things away or from even attacking them in the first place. And they're called phytochemicals. So these phytochemicals are what are acting in our body and can act as a medicine for different ailments. And I know this part is a little nerdy, but I wanted to go over the four main phytochemicals. So first there's alkaloids, and they're kind of bitter tasting. They can often be toxic, but we do use a lot of alkaloids in our daily lives. Well, maybe some of them not in our daily lives because one of them is cocaine, and I mean, not judging you if you use cocaine in your daily life, but I don't know if that would be a healthy choice. Another one is caffeine. If you use that in your daily life, heavens, there's a lot of people that do that. Probably a bit more safe than cocaine. Ephedrine is another one, morphine, and nicotine. So honestly, a lot of addictive substances that I just gave examples of for alkaloids, but not all of them are that way. The next group of phytochemicals is glycosides. And this is a large group of phytochemicals. Some act as laxatives. There are things called cardiac glycosides. So cardiac, we know it's talking about the heart, and it can help your heart function. I'm actually going to be talking about an example of one that was found within the history of medicinal plants that I thought was really cool. Glycosides can also act as a diuretic, and that basically means it helps you go pee more often. It just speeds that up. Next group is polyphenols. That includes things like astringent tannins. That's the kind of stuff that like makes you pucker, or kind of that like lingering feeling on your tongue from a grape. Not like a papery feeling on your tongue, but it kind of just like sticks there. And a lot of polyphenols actually help with gynecological disorders. Last group is terpenes, and those are largely found in conifers, but also other plants that have resinous sap, so kind of that sticky sap. So they're aromatic, and that's to really help them repel herbivores from eating them. And we use them for things like, essential oils and aromatherapy. So this includes plants like a rose plant, lavender, pine, juniper, things like that. And something that I thought was really cool is that not only humans are intaking plants and using them as medicine, but there's actually some animals that do this as well. Primates do this, monarch butterflies, which I thought was so interesting. They will eat certain plants to help them if they are suffering from different ailments, and sheep. They will all ingest medicinal plants when they are feeling ill. I think actually, I don't remember if it was like a story I heard. This is like just coming to me on the fly. So when I was younger, I read a lot of Heartland. I had a horse phase, right? Does every girl have like a horse girl phase? Probably not. But I remember it might have been in there, or might have been like in medicinal plants. We talked about this, but a farmer noticed his horses were eating a lot of willow trees, and willow trees have a compound in them that help with pain. And so from that, he figured that, or it was a single horse, and he figured out that this horse was eating this tree for pain because something was hurting it, and he figured it out because it was eating willow trees. Don't know if that's real, but it was a good story. So maybe we can add horses to some of the animals that eat plants when they're ill. I'm sure there's quite a few animals that will do this, but those are just some examples of, the primates, monarch butterflies, sheep, and horses, according to horse girl Rachel's memory. Okay, so I had to ask the question of how long have plants been used for medicine? I love learning about the history of plants and how they have come into our lives. So this goes really far back for medicinal plants. Like, it's such a broad subject, right? So many millions of plants I think could be put into the realm of medicinal plants. So they've been used since prehistoric times. So they actually found a burial site with a Neanderthal man, and it was discovered in northern Iraq in the Shandavar cave. And with one of the Neanderthal people that they found specifically, he had 8 species of plants that were believed to be used for medicinal purpose. And he's dated to be about 60,000 years old, and some of those plants are still used for medicine today. And just as a note to this tale, I did read that according to some recent research, they are skeptical that this Neanderthal actually did bring in those plants. They think perhaps it was a rodent that burrowed in and brought these plants with it, and it just happened to burrow in around this Neanderthal man that had passed away and had left the debris of those flowers and plants in there. So this story, it could be prehistoric times, but they think it might be this rodent, which was kind of a letdown. But I don't know, maybe it wasn't the rodent. Maybe it was. Moving on, it's still really early that we do have evidence of plants being used. So the Sumerian civilization, which is before Mesopotamia, they have records on clay tablets dating back to about 3000 BC with hundreds of medicinal plants listed, including opium, which we still use today. Another example is Otzi the Iceman was discovered, and he lived sometime in 3000 BC, so kind of around the same period of the Sumerian civilization, and he was found with a mushroom that was probably used to treat whipworm, and that is a parasitic worm in the large intestine. Moving on with these examples, in 2700 BC, about 300 years later, the Chinese were using herbs in more scientific ways to help people. And we also have, in 2500 BC, really early Ayurvedic texts on medicine. And Ayurvedic is basically just Indian medicine based in India. In 1550 BC, Egyptians were recording their knowledge of illnesses and cures with over 700 medicinal formulas on the Ebers papyrus. It included plants like aloe, cannabis, castor bean, garlic, juniper, mandrake, some very common ones that we use today. And then later in 460 to 380 BC, Hippocrates, who's also known as the father of medicine, classified herbs into their essential elements of hot or cold, moist or dry, and he developed a system of prognosis using herbs. In 60 AD, a Roman army physician, Dioscorides, he wrote De Materia Medica, and this is a 5-volume work that covers about 500 plants. It describes them, it shows how to prepare them, and has about 1,000 simple drug recipes within it. It was written in Greek, and because of the detailed descriptions and the origins listed and how he had written out the medical virtues of each plant, it has remained a standard text for about 1,500 years. And yeah, it's still used today. I remember in my medicinal plants class, we went down to the library and they had like a copy of De Materia Medica that you could flip through, and we had all been assigned a plant to research in groups. And so you could flip through that and see if you were one of the lucky ones that had your plant listed in it. Because like I said, he did about 500 plants. But it was really cool, even just like see a copy of what he had done. It's a beautiful book. So much work went into it, and it's cool that it has stuck around for that long. During the Middle Ages, monks were translating and copying classical text, and they were the ones maintaining herb gardens. So because of that, they were also the ones who were preparing herbals to help people. And being monks, they combined these prescriptions heavily with prayer. That was their kind of religious duty to do so. Herbalism became very prominent in the Islamic world during this period as well, particularly in Baghdad. By the 1530s, Paracelsus was changing Europe's attitude towards healthcare because at this point in time, it had been tainted by dishonest physicians and apothecaries taking advantage of people, which is really unfortunate, but that's what was happening. So he was inspired by the doctrine of signatures. Some of you may be familiar with that, but it's basically the theory that the outward appearance of a plant is giving you an indication of the problem it could cure. So for example, if the plant has a flower that looks like a heart, then it's probably going to help some sort of heart problem in your body. Surprisingly, this theory is sometimes very accurate, sometimes not, but it's pretty cool how sometimes it works out very well. In the 16th century, Mexico had the Bedanius manuscript, which described medicinal plants in Central America. So you can see this is like a worldwide thing going around. It's a very central part to human civilization to come up with medicines, right? That's how a civilization is going to thrive and keep going with healthy people. So moving on, in 1775, Dr. William Withering was treating a patient with heart failure and couldn't find a way to help with any of the traditional medicines that he had. So he sent the patient home. The family decided to try their own things. They gave him an herbal brew based on an old family recipe that they had, and this patient started to recover. So of course, Dr. Withering was very intrigued, and he started to experiment with the herbal recipe that this family had. He was able to narrow it down. He found that this recipe used a plant called foxglove. You guys have probably heard of it. And it was one of the main ingredients. And he saw that it was the component that was helping with the heart failure. He also found out that the therapeutic dose, like the helpful dose that could cure heart failure, was also very close to the toxic level where side effects would start to develop. And I feel like this is a very important note with all medicinal plants. There's always a level that is like therapeutic and helpful, and there's always a level that can be toxic and really harmful to you. And this could be like with anything. If you eat way too much sugar, you can die. If you drink way too much water, you can die. And the same goes with medicine, except it's just in smaller amounts, right? So Dr. Withering, he eventually narrowed down what was going on within this plant, what chemical, and it was a glycoside. That's one of the 4 types of phytochemicals within medicinal plants, like we talked about. And the 2 that were acting were digoxin and digitoxin. And they are 2 of the cardiac glycosides that I mentioned we'd be talking about. And they are still used today in treating heart conditions. This was back in 1775 when they started to figure this out. And it's cool that it is still around being used today, over 200 years later. In 1803, the first drug was isolated from a plant. A man by the name of Friedrich Serturner of Germany extracted a white crystal from the opium poppy, and he discovered morphine. In 1852, scientists were able to make the first synthetic drug, meaning they made it themselves, like in a lab, that drug being salicin, which is found naturally in willow bark. I talked a little bit about that with the horse story that somehow is in my mind. And by 1899, so almost 50 years later, the drug company Bayer, who you've heard of, they used this in a more mild form to create aspirin, and that is one of the most widely used drugs today. So naturally, this chemical is found in willow bark. I think I've actually heard of people who, if you're like dealing with pain while hiking or something, if you can find willow bark and chew on it, that can kind of help you keep going in an emergency situation. But this really started the synthetic age of chemists copying what is found in a plant and either extracting it from the plant, or they can synthetically create it. Sometimes only the plant form is effective. Like, you can try and create it in a lab, but it will not work. So you have to go to the plant and extract it there. Okay, we're going to take a quick break because I've been talking so much about medicinal plants. You guys can probably see how much I am loving this, but we're going to come back, talk about how many plants are medicinal, how to use them, and then which houseplants you can be using in your home that have medicinal properties. And we're back and getting right back into it. How many plants are medicinal? Now, for me, like Rachel philosophy, I would argue that to an extent all plants are medicinal to some degree, right? The unfortunate thing is that there is like a huge lack of research when it comes to plants' medicinal properties. There's so many plants in the world, and the time it takes to dive into how a plant affects humans and how it interacts and what chemicals are playing a part in it, it's just a crazy amount of research. And being such a broad field, there is so much discovery to be made. At one point during this class, I was sure I was going to be a researcher for medicinal plants because there is so much to be known in this area. I'm sure a large part of this big gap is because research is rather slow, because when you are testing something as serious as like a drug that everybody could use, you need to know its efficacy, its safety standards, and there's such a long, rigorous process before it can be a public medicine. But yeah, the research to begin with, some of it is there for some plants. Others, it's completely missing. And if it has made its way to be a public medicine that we use today, is gone through quite a process to get there. But yeah, I would argue that all plants are medicinal. Like, the food you eat is affecting you in some way, is helping you in some way. Even like the spices that you are putting on your food can really help in some way. Like, even basil is an antioxidant and can help with stomach issues. And so you putting that in or on your food is affecting you and helping you. I think that's probably another reason why having a rounded, healthy diet that includes a lot of plants is so important, because they affect us positively in so many ways. So anyways, I will get off my little rant about that and go to actual numbers that have been published. So about 40% of the drugs behind a pharmacy's counter in the Western world is derived from plants. That's a huge amount. That's amazing. According to the International Union for Conservation of Nature, there are about 50 to 80,000 flowering plant species worldwide that are used for medicinal purposes. And that's just flowering plant species. There are plenty of others beyond that. And because medicinal plants are so widely used and sought after, this can actually lead to problems. So in one scientific paper, I took a quote from it, and it said, "A highly conservative estimate states that the current loss of plant species is between 100 and 1,000 times higher than the expected natural extinction rate, and that the Earth is losing at least one potential major drug every 2 years. And this is not only due to overcollection of these plants that we need, but it's also due to climate change and habitat destruction. It's something that I don't think is really at the forefront of what we think about when it comes to climate change and us over-harvesting things, but medicinal plants are a huge part of that. And if we lose that, that's like a whole source of medicine being lost, especially for other countries. Some countries still rely on herbalism and these plants in a more raw form. And in 2017, it was estimated that the global market for botanical extracts and medicines was worth several $100 billion. So you can see why this is going on. It's a very lucrative area to be in. And so I think when it comes to over-harvesting and things like that, I'm sure money is more compelling for these people in some cases. I hope not. I hope people are good and think about the earth and what's going on and being sustainable. But I think in some cases, it's definitely not the case. And as a note, herbal remedies, they do often have a really safe image to them, but they do have high risks of toxicity and other effects. I kind of talked about that with the dosage of certain plants. They can be great to a certain point, and then they can be toxic. All right, so when it comes to prepping a medicinal plant, like how do you even use it? You have it, you gathered it, what are you supposed to do with it? So there's several different ways that medicinal plants have been used throughout generations and are being used. So there's decoctions, which is drying the plant and boiling it and using the water. So basically like a tea. That is literally what that is. There's powdering, which is smashing a dried plant to a powder to be ingested. Powdering can also be used when creating different tablets. They can be compressed to create like a swallowable tablet. You can also do extractions with alcohol. So you let the dried plant sit in alcohol and it'll bring out different properties. This forms a tincture. I actually use a tincture sometimes when I'm sick. What is it called? I think it's called Kick Ass Immune. That is the only time you'll hear me swear on this podcast is when I'm telling you about a medicine, and that is the name of it. But honestly, it does not taste good. You let it sit under your tongue for a few minutes and then you just swallow it. But I wouldn't describe it as like enjoyable, but it does really help me like kick out any cold or sickness that is coming on. And I use it pretty often. If you ask my husband, he thinks it's terrible, but I just think he's a baby. It's not that bad. So tinctures are definitely a thing, and you can find them like prepared at like more herbal stores, like natural grocers, things like that, or you can make it yourself. You can prepare a medicinal plant by making a poultice, which is boiling the plant and wrapping it in a cloth to apply it on your skin. And then, of course, just in more general terms, you can be applying medicinal plants by topically applying them. You can ingest them orally. I know some medicinal plants have even been used as suppositories. That's literally where you put could you describe it as like a waxy sort of pill up your bum? You put it in your butthole and it melts there. And apparently that skin is very absorbent and gets it into your bloodstream fast. Have I used one? No, I have not. And I pray that I don't have to because it sounds like a little messy. I don't know. If you have tried it, please don't let me know. I don't want to know. And in today's world, we mostly synthesize our drugs that have been gathered from plants, that we've identified the pure chemical in the plant, and we synthetically create that chemical, put it in a pill, a tablet, and we ingest it that way, because it is very fast acting that way. So if you're interested in using a plant medicinally, you can look up a reputable recipe and follow it. Just be aware, plants are powerful, they are really cool, they can help our bodies, but also they can be toxic. So please act cautiously. Yeah, just be responsible when trying out these recipes. Some of them are really mild and can be really cool. So speaking of that, what houseplants are medicinal? When I was looking this up, there were a lot of plants that were suggested that were not really like normal houseplants that you would find in your home. Some were just a stretch, like it would be a lavender bush. I actually saw that on like Martha Stewart's website. I'm like, okay, Martha Stewart. I don't know of anyone that keeps a lavender bush inside their home. If you do, cool. I'm very proud of you, but I honestly have never seen that. If you have one in your front yard, or like a local park that has some, they don't mind you taking some, you can totally use that. Look up the recipes on your own, but I'm going to focus on the plants that I feel like, okay, I can see that in someone's home. It's not too far of a stretch, maybe some of these more than others, but I really tried to narrow it down. Also, some of them, these lists that I was looking up, mention things like spider plants, peace lilies, ferns, because they clean the air, according to the NASA study. And holy cow, we've ran into this myth in the past 5 episodes. And I know I have repeated myself so many times about this, but you can listen to episode, where is it? I'm looking for it. Episode 47 to hear all the details. But that NASA study does not really translate well to our home environments. So I toss those out the window. I don't even think a plant cleaning the air could really count with what we're talking about as being medicinal. So yeah, I just did not include those. First and foremost, I am sure you guys know this one and what is coming. It's aloe vera. The gel inside of the plant can reduce skin inflammation, it can soothe burns, and it can actually help cuts and skin infections. Another cool thing about aloe vera being used medicinally is you can make it into a juice, and it's considered a superfood. It's anti-inflammatory, it can help relieve constipation, and it encourages good gut bacteria. You can find it at any supermarket. I actually know this personally because I was just trying to find some aloe vera on my grocery store app, and it kept coming up with aloe vera juice, and I was like, ooh, that sounds gross. Please, I just want the gel. But you can buy it and you can try it. Knowing all the things that it can do, maybe I should try it and give it a chance and not just cross it off as gross. Next is the English marigold. It's also known as calendula, which you may have heard of because it is a very popular medicinal plant. And this one I felt like was a little bit of a stretch. I don't know of anyone that has grown English marigold in their homes. More so, it's something used in a yard. So, calendula, or English marigold, can help pain when it is applied topically. So you can rub it on insect bites, and it can reduce the pain and swelling. And it's not just taking the plant and rubbing it on your insect bite. It's usually by making a calendula oil. But you take that oil, add it to beeswax or some other sort of carrier wax to make a salve to be applied topically to those bites or to some other painful sore you may have. And if you're interested, to make this oil, you dry the flowers, you put them in a jar, you add olive oil to cover up the flowers, you stir it up and cap the jar, and then you can either put it in a warm, sunny place, shake it a few times daily, and after about 6 weeks, it's good to go, or you can do this by applying heat, and it's much faster. But after that, you strain out the flowers, and you now have an infused oil that can be stored in a cool, dark place, and this is the calendula oil. The oil can be added to make the salve that I talked about. It can be used in baths or creams, massage oils, facial steams, tinctures, and teas. And this one is said to be gentle enough that babies can use it. I've never tried that, so please don't take my word on it. Please do your own research. This plant, honestly, I think is very well researched and is very mild, but it's effective and used really widely because when I looked up recipes, there was a bajillion. And honestly, it sounds really easy to make the oil. I feel like this is a great place to start if you ever wanted to try to get into medicinal plants, and apparently this is one that can be grown inside if you want to. Next is basil. I had to include this one because you know what? I've seen basil plants in the grocery store. I've definitely taken one home and had it sit in my kitchen. Or to be honest, it slowly died. But you know what? That's part of the plant learning process. I should try again because it's been a few years since that happened. But basil is loaded with vitamins, minerals, a range of antioxidants. And there are some studies out there that suggest it can actually prevent carcinogen-induced tumors. When you ingest basil, it can actually help treat stomach spasms, loss of appetite, gas, fluid retention, head colds, worm infections, and when applied topically, it can even help with warts. I've actually personally used basil on a wart that I was dealing with, and it worked. It was just like the essential oil on a Band-Aid, and I strapped it on. It was a little stinky, but it really wasn't that bad. and it was so much better than getting it burnt off at a doctor's office. They use liquid nitrogen to burn off your warts, and I had that done when I was younger, and it was kind of painful. So I would definitely recommend using essential oil of basil to get rid of warts. Basil can also be used in teas, in tinctures, or like I said, as an essential oil or in a salve. The next plant I wanted to cover was English ivy. And English ivy has antioxidant, antispasmodic, and anti-allergic effects. So if used as an ointment, it can soothe stiff joints and aching muscles. That's just like applying it to the skin. Probably some of the antispasmodic properties coming into play there. And when you freshly crush the leaves, you can use them right onto like a bee or wasp sting to take away the pain. Or you can use English ivy in a tincture, and you can use that on stings when applied topically. English ivy has been known to cause dermatitis in people who have sensitive skin. That's just kind of like an itchy rash. But a lot of people use it to help chronic bronchitis. I've even seen it used in recipes for laundry detergents, for shampoo, for soaps, etc. This was another plant that had so many cool recipes that you could be adding it to use all throughout your home and as a medicine. Next is the areca palm. When I first looked it up, some of the claims were that this plant having a really high transpiration rate, basically the plant lets water out via their stomatas, their pores, a lot higher than other plants. It makes the air more humid, and so that can help with asthma, your sinuses, bronchitis, and help dry, wrinkled skin. I'm not sure how well that would work. I feel like you'd have to have quite a few areca palms to like be able to really help with that. But that was one of the benefits listed for them. And that's not even like taking apart and using it in a more medicinal sense like we've been talking about. But they have been used in Ayurvedic medicine, that's Indian medicine, to treat burn wounds. And it has been commonly chewed as a sort of like addictive substance that can speed up your central nervous system. And it's been known to help with schizophrenia, glaucoma, as a digestive aid, so many different things. But as far as like recipes that I could find for this one, there weren't so many. I don't think this is one that's as widely used as like something in like a tea or a poultice. So I have two more I wanted to share with you. There were a lot more than this, not of like super common houseplants, but of other plants that you could possibly have in your home. So next was a pothos, which pleasantly surprised me. I love a good pothos plant, and there have been some very preliminary studies showing that they have antioxidant and antipyretic effects. Antipyretic means that it reduces fevers and can help bring down body temperatures. However, this study was done on rats and it has not been tested on humans yet, so maybe one day in the future we will be seeing different common like household recipes that use a pothos plant, but for now they're still doing really early studies on it. And lastly, there is sedum, which is a succulent plant. It's commonly used for cough, high blood pressure, it can be used for wounds, and the leaves and flowers are edible. Certain varieties can actually be added to soups, smoothies, and green salads. And when applied topically, they can be used for rashes or ulcers, warts, pimples, etc. If you do happen to have sedum, you can check to see if it's like a safe variety and try out some of these recipes. And that is all I have for medicinal houseplants. I feel like I could go on and on with different plants and what they could do, but like I said, it was starting to get to be a stretch of them not being really normal houseplants that you have in your home. But I do think it's something to keep in mind that plants are simply amazing. The things that they have developed within them to keep them safe and how they can be used for human consumption to help us with diseases and different human ailments, I think is amazing, truly amazing. It makes me love plants that much more, and I hope you guys enjoyed learning along with me, and I hope you appreciate plants just a little bit more and all that they can do. Hope you guys have a great week, and I hope you will join me for next week's episode. Thank Thank you so much for being here and for listening to the Plant School podcast. I hope that you will join me for our next episode. And if you would like to support this podcast and keep it going, there's a link down in the show notes of this episode where you can donate to this podcast, and I really appreciate all that help. Or you can go to my merch store, which is also linked in the notes of this episode, and you can find some really cool plant-related shirts and stickers. And if you want to support the podcast but spend no money, feel free to share it with a friend, leave a review. All these things greatly help me out and allow me to keep doing this. Again, thank you so much for listening and for being here at the Plant School podcast.